Hi, my name is E.T. Barton from BookReviewersClub.com, and today I'm reviewing the book Divergent by Veronica Roth. This is a YA dystopian novel, which is generally not my genre, although I will admit I like Hunger Games a lot, and I also really like Ender's Game. But this one is, something I may not normally buy. I got it because I was at Target and I saw it on the bookshelf, and it had a sticker on it that said Goodreads Choice for 2013, and I thought to myself, what kind of book would Goodreads choose to promote like that? So it got me very curious because Goodreads at this time has 20 million readers. So to think that they would say that this is their book of choice for the year really made me want to know what that book was about. And I went home and I looked it up on the Kindle, and it was like $3 or $4. So I went ahead and I got it. And I started to read it. And it is an interesting kind of mix of a story. I am a writer, and in the writing industry, we would call the writer that wrote it a pantser, because they're kind of writing by the seat of their pants. And as I was reading it, I kept thinking, what the heck is the plot of this story? What is supposed to be happening? Because you're just following along. And that's pretty much what happens through the entire story. You really have no idea what point the author is building to. You're just kind of following along. And if you don't like that kind of story, this story wouldn't appeal to you. But it is basically a dystopian story, which seems to be fairly popular right now. So to give you an idea of the story, there's a girl, and her name is Beatrice. And she's 16 years old, and her brother is like 9 months older than her, so he's also 16. And at 16 years old, they are taken from school, they're tested, and they have to make a choice. Their society has gone so wrong that they are now divided into 4 different kind of factions, I guess you'd call them. There are the selfless faction that rules the government. There is the faction that believes in education, and so they study all the time. There is a faction that is all about action and adventure and never second guessing yourself. You leap before you think. And then there's a 4th one, and I can't remember what it's about because she really didn't talk about it much. She mostly talked about the 3 main factions of the 4. And when they're tested, they're usually told that they qualify for a particular faction. And the heroine, Beatrice, she is actually part of a 5th faction. And when she gets tested, she kind of freaks out her tester, and her tester tells her, don't tell anybody that you are divergent, meaning that she could pretty much fit into any faction. And as you read the book, you find out that the reason she's not supposed to say this is because they find it threatening. They find the divergent characteristics threatening, so the people that are divergent tend to hide it. They don't get together, they don't know who the other divergent are. And she's divergent, so she's supposed to hide this about herself. And she has to make a choice. And her family comes from the selfless group, and they hate the group that studies all the time. And once you decide upon a faction, you leave your family, you pretty much go to that faction, you go to where they live, and you never really return. There are visiting days where you might see your parents, but you pretty much cut them off. And on her day when it comes, she's surprised when she finds out that her brother picks the education side, because that's like their mortal enemy. Her father especially hates that group, and she had been convinced that her brother was going to stay with their parents, and he doesn't. And so then she feels like, well, maybe I should stay with my parents so that they don't have any, so that they're not childless. But then she decides to go for the group that leaps before they act, because she just can't live the selfless life anymore. And she goes and she joins this faction of basically maniacs. And then the rest of the book is being tested. They're going through all the things to prove that they belong in that faction. They're being reprogrammed, they're being retrained, and stuff like that. And you literally go through the whole book not knowing what the plot is, not really understanding what the point of all this is. And a part of me feels like maybe I shouldn't say, because she kind of reveals the plot at the end, which can be frustrating if you're somebody that wants to know what the point of the story is as you're reading it. Like, you know, when you read Hunger Games, you know the point of the story from the beginning. She's going into a battle to the death. You know, in Ender Game, you know what the point of the story is. He's supposed to save the planet. But this one, you really don't know. And I want to say that I want to like the book because Goodreads liked the book. But what I found is that it is an interesting world that's described. It is an interesting lifestyle. There was some interesting action. But a lot of times my mind wandered through the book, and I had to go back and reread what I had just read because I wasn't quite following along. And I did read it all the way through. And for me, if you read it all the way through, that deserves at least 3 stars. So what I did like about the book is I did like the world she described. I did like this dystopian society she was describing. But what I didn't like was that I'm somebody that likes plots. I like to know what the point is as I'm reading, and I didn't find that. And I did find my mind wandering several times, which I tried not to do. And then you get to the end and you realize that the series continues. So I think maybe more of the plot is revealed in the next book. So if you like reading about another world, you would like that for this. For me, I wasn't really interested in reading the next book. I think most people would give this book at least 4 stars because they would probably love it. I'm sure there's a big following for it. For me, I would only give it 3 stars because it is worth reading all the way through. It is definitely worth reading all the way through. It's interesting enough to do that. But I probably won't read it again, and I'm definitely not going to buy the next book. So all in all, I give the book 3 stars, maybe 3.5. But I think a lot of other people that like YA books or dystopian books would probably give it 4 or 5 stars. And that's it. That's my review. Thank you.